You're listening to the Esoterics Podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Fiora.
And this is Joe. Welcome back to the Esoterics Podcast.
How are you, Joe?
I am good. We just had the equinox, and I'm feeling the effects of it. What about you?
Yeah, I am also feeling the effects of it because I can't sleep right now. So it's not been fun.
No, is it like late at night when you wake up,
I
or
just
you're
can't
not
get
able
to
to fall
sleep. Yeah,
asleep?
I just can't get to sleep, which is really bizarre for me. But and
So what do you do
read books until I get sleepy.
until you fall asleep? Until did you finally
Yeah.
just pass out from
Yeah,
exhaustion?
until I just can't read anymore, and then until my eyes get tired, and then I'm like, okay, I guess let's go to sleep now. But it's really weird for me because I normally don't have a problem sleeping.
Trouble sleeping?
Sleep is not generally a problem for me. But I guess it's the equinox thing because I know you were asking if it was like a full moon thing, and I don't, and it was very strong on the full moon. But yeah, I think now that you said equinox, I'm like, oh, that explains it. That explains more.
The energy is so crazy. It's just like this big shift. I mean, I thought that the January energy was, I'm pretty sure I described it as an asshole energy in January. And then February was just a lot more gentle. It was the Aquarius,
Hmm.
right? The lover and just the sweet and harmonious sort of
Hmm.
energy. But I don't think that, when he moved into like Pisces energy, that it was any different. It was still very go with the flow, but I think it's the Aries energy now that we're in. It's like, okay, come on, time to take action, time to get shit done, time to do, go, all that stuff. So,
Yeah, definitely. Okay, hey, so we've been getting a few questions about the retreat as far as like what someone can expect to get out of it or what they can expect to learn. So I think there's a little clarification that we need to do.
yeah, okay. So the original or the intent is, that it's an intuitive development retreat, but maybe that was sort of a, wording that was a little bit too pigeonholed because what I'm looking at it as is an opportunity to spend, 3 days getting to connect with your higher self.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, you develop a stronger relationship with your intuition. The other thing is, recently I just had like a 4 week workshop.
Hmm.
And so for 4 weeks, we covered different things. But the big takeaway from that was once you learn to connect to your higher self, connect to your intuition through meditation, that sort of thing, and then sing an Akashic prayer to help strengthen that connection, and then pulling an oracle or a tarot card for validation of the messages, that's really all you need to develop your abilities intuitively.
Oh,
And I just thought that was huge and a breakthrough. And, I've had students that I've worked with for 6 weeks, and I've had students that I worked with for, 4 weeks or 12 weeks. And just those 4 weeks with focusing on those three steps, it made a world of difference.
hmm,
So, um, I think that this retreat is less about intuitive development and more about connecting with your intuition and your higher self, but then also giving people the tools to validate those messages that come in so that they're not questioning themselves.
right, right. Yeah.
But what do you see it as? Because you're just as much a part of it as I am. I mean,
Yeah, I think that by connecting to your higher self, you just naturally become more intuitive.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But then there's also other things, right? We're going to have meditations and breath work. And I mean, what are some of the things that you're going to offer?
Yeah, so with the breath work again, it just allows you, because when you are trying to connect with your higher self and you are trying to become more intuitive, you need to take care of you're taking care of three things. So it's your physical body, your health, it's your spiritual body. So these are the things that we incorporate with the breath work, and with movement is the how do you connect your mind, your body, and your spirit all together? How
Right.
do these three all function together? So that's where I come in with the breath work, and then we'll do some kind of movement activities as well. Even something as simple as doing a breath work that incorporates the movement of the body, um,
Yeah.
allows for that, because when you have that connection, it's the mind body spirit connection that allows your intuition to really just kick up, and you really start to feel, where in your body the signs hit, um,
Yeah.
when you're picking up on things, and yeah, and it's a really beautiful process, but it all works together, it all ties together, and it's beautiful.
It does. And, we're going to talk to our friend Steph about, or the women's circles that she's facilitating. But I have to tell you that she inspired me. And I think, one of the things that we need to have every single day is some sort of circle, some sort of just sacred, beautiful,
Yeah.
connection circle
Yeah.
of all of us together.
Yes.
So, on top of a creative aspect, Cassie's going to come and she's going to teach us, give us a fun creative outlet. And then there's walks on the beach and hikes and bonfires and just connecting over really good, healthy, yummy, nutritious food.
Yep.
So, it'll be a great weekend full of connecting with self and others, and, you know, listening to your body and your mind. And yeah, I'm excited. So.
Yes. Yeah. So, if you haven't already, if you would like to see more details about our retreat, this is taking place on May 27th through May 29th, and this is in West Olive, Michigan. And the current
Yes.
price is $888, and this is for 3 days and 2 nights. And we do have payment plans available. The details for the retreat and everything are going to be linked in our show notes.
Yeah, so join us. Join us. It'll be a wonderful opportunity. And if you want to save some money, you can also just join us during the day, and that is $555 for just the day retreat.
Yep.
So yeah,
All right. And now we're going to move into our conversation with Steph.
yeah, it's a good one.
Hi. So, no, today we're welcoming Steph. Hi, Steph.
Hi,
Hi,
everybody.
Steph.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Steph is an expat living in Peru, and we're going to talk to her about her journey moving to another country, how she found herself, creating circles of gathering, and all that good stuff.
How I found myself. That sounds good too. Still going there.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. All right, Steph. So, yeah, so tell us about yourself. Tell us just about yourself and where you came from and how you ended up in Peru.
Yeah, right on. Let's see. I am from the Northwest. I'm originally from the Northwest, and I think like we do in circles, I think it's fair also to kind of honor where I'm coming from, no, and especially in my given trio here. I think it's also fair
Yeah.
to say that, like, really average middle class white family of the 80s.
Ah.
And I want to say that because with all that white middle class average 1980s, there's a lot of invisible trauma, no?
Yeah.
And so I was raised that way. We lived outside of the Seattle area in Everett. And there was some sort of intuitive that I understand now was me, I think, listening to this piece of me
Mm.
when I was the
Mhm.
first one to leave the state to go study. No? And then when I was the one that started to travel by myself, there were these places where, or these little pieces of me that were very different from my family. So nowadays we recognize this like the black sheep. No, I don't know if we say that these days anymore. But this weekend when we had a circle, we all had identified some things, and really the common denominator between everybody was that this thing that brings us together is this difference that made us from our families. No, and so this was me. This was my place.
Yeah.
And so I studied, and when I went down to study, this is when I went to Portland, I went to study and I didn't go home. I stayed and I studied and I worked. Right. I wasn't the one that went home on Christmas breaks or went home for the weekend to do my laundry. I didn't do that. So because I stayed down there and because I worked while I was studying, I saved money because I wasn't doing anything else. And so I began to travel. And now, back then, this is even before JetBlue. Is that what it's called? Right? And remember when they first came out, they sold really cheap tickets. But I was traveling right before that. And so it was cheaper for me to go to Latin America than it was to go to New York, for instance.
Oh. Huh.
Right? And then they say about New York that you need a friend so you can sleep on a couch and you can eat some food.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was far cheaper for me to just go by myself to Latin America. And so I did that. I did this, and then I became a high school teacher. I taught for 7 years in total. I taught from the little ones all the way to the big high school ones. And so I got a bunch of breaks during the year.
Yeah. The summer off.
The summer off, the spring break.
Where in Latin America? Where were some of the places that you went?
Oh, my love, I've been from the border, our southern border from Texas all the way down to Patagonia. So I did it little by little. No?
Okay.
I lived in Mexico for a little while at university. I went and I lived down there and I did some work. And then the year after I graduated, actually from undergrad, the next day I got on a one-way ticket to Mexico. And went back to Mexico. I worked for a social justice program that, back at home when we invite kids either from high school or some church groups, they go down to Mexico to do good.
Humanitarian. What is that called? It's usually through their church where they go down and they help people. What is that called?
I don't know because we were trying to do like a different take on it. We were trying to do social justice. And so we had a bunch of university groups as well.
Okay.
And we were the ones that would receive them through our program now. And so we spent the week working in community, but then we would take them to the border, do a long meditation to kind of recognize people at the border and people in Latin America and what they had to do, and like the big part of it was like losing name and what that means.
Okay.
We would work in a soup kitchen once a week. There's also I also studied, my undergrad is in criminal justice. And so I worked with the Latin American population up there in Portland through the criminal justice system. And so when they're deported, they're just dropped off in Tijuana.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even if they're not Mexican.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Anybody just gets dropped off.
Yeah.
So we would go and we would work in a soup kitchen and a place where folks would go because they build their own community, no? Mm-hmm. And I mean, the amount of teenagers that you meet that don't even speak Spanish.
Yep.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking.
Okay. So you're telling me that they are not even from Mexico, but they're dropped off and they don't speak the language and they're just teenagers.
That's
it happens. Yeah.
Oh.
I had a friend from high school who this happened to. His family brought him here when he was like 2 years old. So he was not born here, he was born in Mexico. And at some point, I don't know what happened, he ended up getting deported. And he had to stay there for, I think, like 5 years. And he didn't even speak Spanish. And he had to stay there for so long and move with family who he'd never met. And
it's heartbreaking.
Just, I know I'm not gonna I'll complain about it, but I mean,
it's not right.
No.
Yeah, it's tough.
By the way, mission trip was the word I was looking for.
Yes,
a mission.
Yeah. That's what they go on.
Which those are much different, that sounds like, than what you did, because I feel like
we were we were definitely
really?
trying, like, one of the rules was don't bring all your stuff and then bring it.
Ah.
Don't show up to the place with all your donations.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
then that right there creates this hierarchy
Yeah.
between
Hierarchy.
people.
Yeah.
So
I
they would
mean,
donate stuff
fair.
because, of course, they came from all over the United States and they had a bunch of stuff to donate, and then we would collect it, and then throughout the time, or we would eat lunch with the families every day. We lived in these small communities, no, on the outsides of Tijuana,
Mm.
and so when we found mamas, and there aren't a lot of father figures there
Uh-huh.
because they leave,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
So then we became closer and closer to the families and all the mamas. And so when people needed things, or we didn't start a school, but we tried to have like supplies,
Yeah.
so that the kids had stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that. And actually, there's just a small detail that that the man that I was working with there, I kind of
Mhm.
liked.
Uh-huh.
But I was too busy living my life. I think I was only 21 or 22. And so when I left to go back home, um, we stayed in contact. So then lots of time goes. I sink more into teaching. And so during my teaching years, I went to Europe for the second time. I went to Central America for a whole summer. Like I would leave right after the school year and I'd come back with the first
Ah.
meeting for
Yeah.
teaching, no? And
Yeah.
I would just backpack. And my rules were always the same. Like I have one travel buddy. It's a friend from junior high and so or high school. And so other than that, I travel by myself.
Uh-huh.
I don't plan anything. I just go to the next country. And so I made my weight systematically down.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then and I taught high school and I loved teaching high school in Portland. I taught high school Spanish. It felt great. It felt good. And then I quit and I bought another one-way ticket.
Uh-huh.
And so that's where, like, after all this work and doing all the things I've been doing, sure, it was because there's a lot of commentaries about running away from things. No? Like that that invisible trauma that I mentioned in the beginning, sure. So now you have this black sheep of the family that left home and never went back during university, and now she's traveling everywhere. And so even the closer friends who felt courageous enough to confront me with, like, why do you keep leaving? That's like
Mm.
a thing that comes up. You must be running away from something. And what I understand now is that actually, I think I was actually listening to my actual self.
Yes. So that's interesting because that doesn't occur to me. What are you running away from? It occurs to me that you're running towards something. You're
Yeah.
looking for that thing that is out there for you. It's about, and I think maybe that's because, Fiora and I get that because we have fives in our blood, and there has to be a five someplace in your soul
I think
blueprint.
there are. I think I have some
Yes.
fives. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Well, I just when we identify like white middle class 1980s, of course, this ended in a divorce.
Uh-huh.
Right. So there's like deep trauma in my family. My mother's from Europe, and my grandparents survived a war. No, so we're working with like deep actual trauma. Then we work with just like social drama of
Yes.
the 80s,
Uh-huh.
and so then there's a divorce. My brother died in a car accident. And so there were a lot of things where from the external, someone could look at me and say, like, wow, this one just doesn't want to face her reality a little bit. No, so I'm just going to keep going. And I go by myself and I just do it with a mochila, with a backpack. And I'm just going to leave for the summer,
Right. Yeah.
And so it was easy to interpret. But Joe, yeah, what you're saying, yeah, sure. That's coming from an enlightened soul who understands it.
I think the black sheep gets a bad rap because I
Yeah.
think definitely the idea of a black sheep is somebody who, you know, walks to the tune of their own drum, like the beat of their own
Yeah.
drum. Like they live their life in the way that they see fit, not in the way that other people impose on them.
Mhm.
Right.
Also, though, I do believe that somebody with that mindset and living in that way, what you're actually doing is releasing trauma, and a lot of it is ancestral trauma, family limitations, and generational trauma. There's so much stuff there to unpack, and sometimes you need that distance from where you came from where you grew up, to be able to look at it from a different perspective. And I always think that when you go somewhere, especially when you're going like that on your own, it's you're not running away. You're going to find yourself. You're going
That's
to yeah.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I feel like here in Portland. I found a part of myself. I never would have met her or known her if I had stayed in Michigan. Not to the degree that I know myself now. Never. I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say from the actual, it feels like the opposite perspective. The first time I went to Europe, 20 something like this. I don't remember, 2021 something, and I felt at home.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it was this, and my blood, my mother is 100% Polish,
Mhm.
but what happened after the war there is that of course they had to move and leave, and so the actual state and the actual passports are something different.
Uh-huh.
But I remember going. I mean, I went there for the first time, and it was the whole backpack deal. It was the the multiple months that people do this for, but something felt really comfortable.
Mhm.
And so, because back in my 20s and being 2021, I didn't even use the word trauma.
Right, right.
Yeah.
None of us did.
No, yeah. And I had no concept of listening to myself.
Right.
So also, it was really easy to believe the peanut gallery's commentary about how, of course, I was escaping the visible trauma of my family now.
Mm.
And so then, and I remember feeling like at home in Europe, like I just felt like things made sense there. And then culture shock coming home, which we know about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Mhm.
it's mind blowing
Mhm. Mhm.
how difficult
I
it is
spent
to then come home.
Right.
Mhm.
I spent 2 weeks in Italy, and just coming back after 2 weeks was like a culture shock. So I can't imagine living over there and then coming back.
It's so heavy. It's so we could talk for a whole time about just what it's like to go home for Christmas break.
Right.
How did you find yourself in Peru?
Right. So all the traveling, then the one-way ticket after I quit my wonderful, we call it a vocation when we love our job so much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I had to go. I don't know, I had to go. Again, it was that. So this trip turned into me moving to France.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so
Yep.
then France fell apart. It was a broken heart, but that was a good year of recognizing more whatever you recognize when hearts break so deeply. And so then the man that I mentioned in the very early Mexican trip
Uh-huh.
with whom I worked, we had stayed
Yeah.
friends the whole time.
Uh-huh.
So when he decided to visit me 10 years later, because of France, so all the random details start to come together. Because
Yeah.
of my experience having just moved to France, I just moved and I sold everything I owned and I was going to create a new life.
Mhm.
And with it backfiring, the grand lesson of the many, one of the most concrete, easy to express lessons was because the man that I met in Mexico is from Austria.
Uh-huh.
So it was very easy for me to say, I don't want to move to Vienna and I don't want to invite you to Portland. Like, we have to figure something else out.
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
And so he talked to his job and it was either Ecuador or Peru, and we really wanted to move to Ecuador. And they sent us to Peru.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So 7 years ago, 2 children and a completely different life.
Oh, you've
Wow.
been there you've been there for 7 years?
Yes, love.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
That's why it's hard to talk about going home for
So
Christmas.
your children were born in Peru.
Number one, who's now 6 years old, she was born in Portland and she knows she's from Portland. She knows it's her city, but we came back when she was 2 months old. Our youngest child, who's now 3.5, she was born. She's our anchor baby. She keeps us in Peru. She's Peruvian.
Anchor baby.
Yeah. So she's the one with the Peruvian passport. So number 2 was born because I wanted for my first birth. I have a lot of my women back at home with whom I'm still in touch. They are doulas. They have given home births. Like they're into this, no? And so my first birth, because you have no idea what's going to happen in birth. I wanted to go home. And so we
Yeah.
went home and we coupled it with a little Christmas holiday, so that I had my people. So I had my people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you do it one time, you can do it. You can do it many more times. And so then when I got pregnant the second time, it was it was
Right.
fine to. I felt more comfortable. I felt empowered. I felt like I was capable to give birth in our home in Peru.
Nice.
So we stuck around.
So you did. So we're both home births then. It sounds
My
like.
first child. It's going to be so interesting to like talk to her when she's understands more. She came 5 weeks early. So in Portland, you can't have a home birth at 5 weeks early because it's pretty early.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how we see, because she also she was starting to come 5 weeks early, and then it took 48 hours for her to show up. So it'll be like that it's not science, that philosophy of why so early, but then why so slow? Like, who are you going to be when you're older?
That's interesting.
Yeah, you know what
that
I'm
is
saying?
An interesting dichotomy of two things that are opposed to each other.
Because sometimes when they come, this is just in general, but sometimes coming early and then you put the philosophy together because the birth was, it was quick and early, and there was like, this child wanted to come into the world.
Right.
Mine had her own sweet rhythm. So no, the first one we ended up going to the hospital.
It could also be too, it's like she wanted to come early, but your body was like, wait, hold on. You need to wait a little bit longer.
It could have totally been that. Absolutely. And her it could have absolutely been that. And her father was actually in Peru at the time. So there was also recognition of like, what plane ticket do I buy? and
wait for dad.
Yeah. And that she waited for. So it was sweet.
Yeah. That is sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's been 7 years in Peru.
Okay. So what we really wanted to get into was, so now currently you're organizing these beautiful women's circles, but I just want to know, like, how did that idea just start? Where did that spawn from, and what was your intention with beginning?
Yeah, that started in postpartum. And like, I don't mean to laugh because postpartum is such a complex world. And so for some people, it's very, very, very complex and very, very, very difficult. Some people, it's not. So there's this long spectrum of what postpartum offers. So given that whole history and that story of mine, I wasn't surrounded by my family. I wasn't surrounded by my family or my culture or my language or my food or my anything, not my anything. And so it was very tough, and it was very alone. It was very lonely. I mean, I ultimately recognized that I was dealing with some postpartum depression, and in all of my time through my 20s and all that, the little dramatic things that happened in my family, I recognized sadness. It wasn't new to me. It wasn't new, but this time it was definitely different. And no one ever talks about postpartum. And there's a lot of guilt that goes with motherhood, because you just give birth to a baby. Be happy.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember when I came home with my daughter, and I was almost 21. I was like a couple days away from being 21 years old. And so my friends didn't, I had not been around newborns because of my friends or anything like that. I was the first one out of my friends to have a child. And I remember being home with her and holding her and looking at her, and like, for a moment I stopped thinking about her, and I felt this thing about myself, and I felt so alone and so like worthless. It was this really, really depressing feeling that overcame me for a few minutes. And then because I felt like, oh, I had been this vessel and everyone had given me all this attention, like, because like people do when you're pregnant, like, people open doors for you, they go kind of the extra mile for you, and then all of a sudden you're not pregnant anymore, and it's like that's gone. And yeah, it was a really overwhelming feeling. The only thing that helped me in that moment was like I was breastfeeding, and that like was that, that instant shot of serotonin, and that's what like helped me get out of that. But yeah, my second child was far different, because at that point I wasn't working, I was staying at home, and so the postpartum with that child was so much more escalated and long term, because I didn't realize that postpartum, man, because I always thought it was like, oh, you're just sad. Like, to me, like postpartum depression, like depression is sad. And I was like, oh, I'm not sad. I'm not a sad person. But I was angry.
Yes.
I was mad.
Yes.
Like, things would set me off so easily.
Yes.
And I didn't recognize that until well after that, when someone said that depression can manifest as anger or as frustration, or like
irritation,
things easily set you off. Irritation. Yes. Yeah.
Those God.
Yeah.
Because I remember like everything that the Austrian did would just irritate me, and it was hard to talk about it, because if I told anybody about it, they're just little things. It's just little things, and it's so unimportant. It's so unimportant. But like rage, like real anger, anger, and when I refer to being lonely, it's because, I'm also just sitting in there kind of waiting for him to come back from work. My only good friend at the time was a single, he was a guy. He didn't have any kids. He was married, but he's just living his
life.
Fun life. And so there was no possible conversation there with a guy, who was just managing things at home. And I remember too, someone told me like, did you know that depression can show up in irritation? And I was like, what? And you Google it, and then you look at like postpartum depression, and you start understanding it, and you're like, and it's really empowering and beautiful, because you understand something.
Yes.
God, because half of it is you don't understand what's happening, and you can even say in your brain like, what you're doing right now is driving me mad, but I know that all you're doing is sitting funny, like, so we can't even talk about it. No, there's like not even enough therapy to like get you through that, that peaceful conversation.
Yes.
I certainly don't experience or haven't experienced postpartum, but whenever I am volatile or I know, okay, there's something going on. Whenever I get really frustrated, really angry, really easily, there's something going on.
Yeah, and hormones are not in their place.
Right.
Not one of them. Absolutely. And like that is months and months and a year. It takes a long time. And it's again, people talk about postpartum, but like, it's not just 40 days. Down here, they refer to the quarantena, the quarantine. So the sacred 40 days after birth. And so I've even worked with women that are like, well, I'm done with my postpartum because they got to day 42. And it was like, oh, sweet one. No, you're not.
So is that the intention of the woman's circle, was to be like have a safe space for women experiencing postpartum?
Well, it was there once I started realizing those things, was like, I got to go certify to be a doula. I got to be a doula.
Yeah.
I need to, plus after giving birth, for some people, but I'm one of those people that's like, let's do it again. And like, let's be around it. I'm like just a birth junkie. Just like, give me all the pregnant ladies. Let's give birth.
I'm horrified at the thought of even doing it once. There would be two times.
Yeah, and a lot of people are there. And everyone's birth story is completely their own. So it's all a different game for everyone. But so I wanted to become a doula. I'm living in a different culture. All the different things make it harder than it would be at home, because at home I just go do the things I do to get certified, and I put those things in frames and I put them on my wall, and I talk to my friends that are having babies, and it's easy. So that wasn't happening in my existence down there. And I gotta think about it. We move along. This is what happened. I had no friends except for the guy with whom I'm still friends these days. And he's a lovely human and now has 2 children of his own. So now he gets it.
Yes.
And finally, just by it's beautiful serendipity. It's the way, it's not coincidence. It's the way that my life needed to go. This woman in the barrio, like living right next to me, we had continually seen each other. Our kids looked the same. They both had the amber necklaces and the wooden spoon. She invited me to the park one day. And she had been going to the park with 2 other women, and all of our kids were born within 10 days.
Wow.
And we all realized too that we had gone to the same birthing house. There was one like birthing house, like holistic birthing house. I think back at home we call them like birthing homes, where
or birth centers.
Birth center, like where you want to have a as empowered birth as possible, not having to go to the hospital, but you're not in your living room, right?
Yes.
And so we're talking, and things feel so amazing because it's not just the little band-aid to loneliness. It was like one of them sat there and smoked cigarettes the whole time, and I was like, "Wow, great! Like that's awesome." So against everything that everyone says, and our kids now are 1. So I spent the whole first year trying to remain. This whole first year was the tough year, no? I don't want to use too many idioms or something, because some people really struggle with deep mental health in postpartum.
Right.
So I spent the first year trying to figure it out, and in some darkness. So then I go to the park, and one of them is smoking the whole time, and the other one has chosen to be a single mother the whole time. I mean, like that was her plan, which is also not very part of this culture, to make the choice to be a single mother. We're from 3 different countries, all of us, the 4 of us there, and it felt so good. It felt so like I could sit back and lay back, and all the kids played, and it was like this sip of I'm like a human again. Yeah. And I'm like a human with other humans again, and I'm not just like dando teta. I'm not just like a mother. Not just breastfeeding all day and like making soup or something, or just resting, or like I was watching TV. We don't even have a TV, but I was like watching a TV. And so at one point, and I remember telling them this, at one point I said, so now it's 2017. And I told them, why are we doing this with other women? Like, why are we only 4? And they were like, what do you mean? It was kind of just thrown off. But I remember that moment as like, no, why isn't everybody doing this? Everybody. Right. And of course, in that place, I was still a postpartum mama. So at this point, I think maybe I was thinking, like I was dreaming up things of like, I'm going to go rent a space, and all the Zumba that I do on my computer, I'm just going to like bring the computer to the space, and we can have tea there, and we can have like some toys for the kids, and we can just do Zumba together. Like, why aren't we doing Zumba together? Let's just do my yoga videos. I had no intention to like certify to do yoga or to teach anybody any movement. I just wanted to do it, not in my living room by myself. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's something to be said about that, because this is something that actually only came into my knowing very recently. So we hear a lot about our stress responses, and when we get stressed, and there's the fight or flight, right? Fight or flight or freeze response to stress. However, women have another tendency to deal with stress, which is much more different. Actually, fight or flight is actually a more masculine response to stress. the more feminine response to tend or fight or flight is actually for stress actually is tend and befriend,
I've
Tend
heard of
and
this
which is
concept.
befriend.
Yes.
tend
Tend
and
and
befriend. Yeah.
befriend.
So this is like, okay, so something awful just happens to you, right? And who do you call? Like, because you can call, yeah, like if you have a significant other, a male, a husband, you can call him and be like, blah blah blah, and tell him, and he's just gonna tell you like, calm down, or it's not that big of a deal, whatever. But normally we do this, and who do we call? Like, we call our
Yep.
girlfriends
Uh-huh.
and say like, hey, like, this is what happened, and because you want someone to sympathize with you, you want someone who understands, and you want to have this whole conversation around what just happened, not just tell someone, but you want to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of
Tend and
that
befriend.
beautiful.
Man,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
that's
You
like
want that nurturing, you want that feedback, you want sometimes,
yes.
Yes.
you just want somebody to say, you know what, that's okay that you got mad, because
Yeah, just
you know,
feminine energy. Just feminine
yeah, the
energy.
masculine
'Cause
energy, like, oh,
yeah, these guys
oh
like to
well,
solve a bunch of stuff.
blah, blah, right, yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that is that fight or flight is like, either you confront the problem
Yeah.
or you run away from the problem, whereas tend and befriend is different than that. It's more of like, oh hey, let's work through this, or
Mhm.
let's work on this together, or hey, that happened to me too, and
Yes.
that was so frustrating,
Yes.
and now you relate, now you don't feel so alone in whatever it is you're going through, no matter how
Right.
small.
I call this alchemy
Yes,
in my
Yes.
circles.
yeah. So how did you find members to join?
So, yeah. So then I got pregnant again. Because then we're all just hanging out, and
Mhm.
now our community of people is growing. And
It's
so things
growing.
feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah, everyone's making babies,
Yeah.
everyone's becoming friends. We sink into a really nice life in Lima. Right now we're living in Lima. So
Okay.
I'm dabbling with this birthing center to,
Uh-huh.
be a doula. I get pregnant, I go and I start studying things. Um I start receiving a lot of energy work, different
Uh-huh.
things,
Oh, uh-huh.
Reiki, Akashic records, things of this nature. And then and from the very beginning, so even before, I was having the ideas of putting my computer up with Zumba, no, and I went into space. So the first time
Yes.
someone read my Akashic records, it identified that I was there in this place with women around me. And I was like, yeah, doing Zumba. It's going to be great. Like, that's the idea. And things kept going. I wasn't the only one that got pregnant. We were kind of living in a really nice expat community. It was people from all over. It was comforting. It was absolute family. Absolute family.
Yeah.
In this situation, people leave. And then in our situation, so we have 2 kids and there is a pandemic that happens.
Mhm.
Yes.
I guess I should back up though. The school year is different down here. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
we have summer break during Christmas.
Uh, oh.
Huh?
That
It's
actually
because
makes
we're
more
on
sense.
we're on the other side of the globe.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
upside
like
down.
Australia, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
So so the last month of school. So now my oldest child is going to preschool, if we want to call it that, like a
Mhm.
little preschool. And
Mhm.
there's all these moms, and I try to do my best to run sometimes there, and there are sweet supportive commentary about like, oh, look at this one's trying. So I looked at them at one point and I said, why don't we go to the park that's right behind the school? Why don't we all meet like an hour early and do yoga? Like, not Zumba, but just like stretch, sit in a circle,
Yeah.
stretch, like talk about stuff. And sure enough, the first time we get together, everyone showed up like an hour before, and we all just sat
Mhm.
there and talked. Everybody talked.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that someone in our community had lost a child. And so I
Oh.
started, this was not the intention. This was not the intention at all. But I started this circle of moms who wanted to do yoga with a candle
Mhm.
and some incense and some stones. There are some particular stones that we use with mamas. And I told
Uh-huh.
them, hey, before we get into everything, I just want to name some names. I want to recognize what happened this weekend and like just let everyone know kind of what I'm dealing with, no? Because it was a friend of mine. And sure enough,
Yeah.
we all sat
Yeah.
around and like we all just became mamas. just mamas that wanted to talk. And like, I think in the middle of some conversation, we kind of did some weird stretching, but like the idea was not yoga, right? Everyone is kind of doing this while we talked about our feelings. So then that became a thing, but now we're looking at like October. We're looking at September, October, and school's almost done. So I get a friend that's a yoga like a yoga certified yoga, whatever. And we were trying to make it more real. Let's do this and let's be real.
Yes.
We started meeting 2 days a week, an hour and a half before. It was like really great. And then summer break happened during those times, and it got difficult because that's what summer break does. And then like the first day of school, the kids all went to school, and then before the kids even got home, it was, I think we're not going to come to, this is March now because school starts in March.
Oh.
So it was like, I think we're going to hold off this week. Let's not send the kids. And then that was a Wednesday. And then Monday, the whole world shut down. Which took us all into where we went.
Okay.
Deep, dark, lonely. Like, it's like the world went into postpartum. Without the birthing.
Yeah.
It's like the world had to stay home and see how uncomfortable it felt to rest. See how uncomfortable it felt to be with these people that we always left every day.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone had this wonderful, socially acceptable escape every day to go to work.
Right.
So my group, because at this time we have a WhatsApp chat, you know? So I have my group because we would like meet at a certain time and whatever we would say to each other. And so now this group starts turning into like, how's everybody doing today? Because like
mental health check-in.
Because I just smashed a broom on my kitchen counter. How's everyone else doing? You know, like things got bad over here. And it was also like, what are you doing with your kids? Because down here in Peru, no one was allowed to go outside. Nobody.
Wow.
Yes. And so we were all in, and we live in a big city, no? Lima's a big city. So when we imagine big cities, it's not everybody has a yard. It's everyone's in an apartment building. So this group turns into like, like a support network of intentions, gratitude, survival, tend and befriend.
Yes.
You know, because like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Plus also the world is in a pandemic. Like I think I'm having like an anxiety attack, you know, things like this. Not to mention the children.
Yes.
Not to mention like doing the things that people had to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my family had plans anyways to move out of Lima. These got pushed back because of the quarantine and the pandemic. And so finally, instead of moving in April, we got to move in August.
Okay.
I do not know. I got a hair up my ass. And in October, it just so happened that the full moon landed on Halloween of that year. And I was like, Samhain, I fucking love Samhain. Like, let's do it, baby. And like, it just so happened that a friend was staying with us at the time. So I had like a sister with me. And it just so happened that because now we live in this sacred valley. So what's happened also, and I think it's happened up in the States too, people have left the cities. Yes, to go out to where there's fresh air and their kids can run around and like no one cares about school anymore, right? So
they figured that they could do it at home, so now they just do.
Now they just do it. A beach. So I happened to have like a friend that was staying with us at the time, and this is actually the woman that invited me to the park 5 years earlier. Oh. So like with all my honor and all my like, oh my gosh, let's do this, and because the pandemic put us all online.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was like, I don't know, there's this Zoom thing that's out there. Why don't I ask all those women on my list if they want to have a women's circle? Because I had also begun going to them in my second pregnancy. And I would go, I have breastfed in women's circles. I have babies sleeping on me in women. Like, so I started going.
Yeah.
So when I started going, obviously it was like this. I completely skipped this whole part of the story. I had begun going prior to all this, and I thought it was the most amazing thing ever to sit around with a group of 20 strange, like not strange women, but strangers that are women.
Yes.
Yeah. And And every single one of them, no matter what walk of life, and again, I'm in Peru, so it's not even like my people. It's not my people at all, but like every single one, all through the cycles of female existence, all through the life patterns, all through the I can't have babies, I want babies, I have babies, I don't want babies, like all the different stories. And you feel like that too.
Right. You connect and you can hold space for people who are different than you, but at the same time, just like you.
And you feel recognized. You feel recognized.
Yes.
And heard.
Yes.
And
Heard,
all
seen,
those things. Yeah.
recognized,
Connect.
and all the verbs. All the verbs.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, which is beautiful, what I do now and what I've learned to do is also really sprinkling in this spirituality to it. Spiritual, music, ritual, and then I've made my stuff my own. But so then fast forward to the 2020 Samhain full moon, and I just thought it was the perfect opportunity to try something on for size. And I did it with my beloved mamas from the park. So it was like a safe space. And I was like, hey, I don't know. We've been talking on, we used to get together and try to do yoga and chat. Then we just went through this quarantine thing together. Like, why don't we just meet up on an evening and try to have a virtual circle? So
Yeah,
that's my virtual circle that I have now.
Okay.
And so now this is 2 years ago. Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it really kind of slipped into place.
What's for you? I think we've already covered, like, obviously what's the most enjoyable, the fulfilling parts of these gatherings. But what would you say is like the most difficult thing about organizing these?
Oh. I have some shit that I'm working on. And it's the same shit as everybody, basically, with its different flavors and its different shades. It's this stuff from an old narrative that our inner child is still working on or still needing. Right? And so I would honestly, I tell you, some of my biggest obstacles are things that are just showing up inside myself. And even just a couple of moons ago, I remember thinking, like, this is just my little prueba. This is my little test. No? Because I have a teaching background. Teaching comes up in all my numerology. Like, I'm Cancer Leo. I'm 3 minutes away from Leo. I have Aries all over my chart. I have no problem talking to people, talking in front of people. None of this is this. And this is not a problem. And I also, as a teacher, also I had to create. I had a book, no? And they said, like, at the end of chapter 1, make sure the kids know this. But then when you're teaching, no one actually sits in there and cares what you do. So I got to create that. And this is where I find my creative stuff, like I don't scrapbook. I make classes. Or now I've like just literally grown into, I'm not 20 anymore, I'm 40. And now I have this different vision, different idea. It's a different chapter of a different book. So it's a different moon. And so me translating, I use a lot of astrology in it. And so me translating like what we should do for this moon, it's like creative time for me, no? So sometimes the hardest thing is what I'm continuing to learn and heal in myself. Like even before I show up to the circle and I get to talk, even before then I've already dealt with, for instance, and it's so real. It's so real. Like how many people show up and how my value as Stephanie has nothing to do with how many people show up.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
It's the same in classes, online classes, meditations, the lives, what have you.
Totally.
We base our worth sometimes or our success on the number of views we have, and that's not at all.
Yes. Your guys' imposter syndrome episode was, it's like, I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would honest to God, every news cycle, it's some version of that. It's some version of my own healing that needs to happen and is happening. Um, it's happening even in the creation of these things, or even just knowing that another moon is coming up, and along with me being okay talking in front of people and creating things, like I'm not business minded.
Yeah.
So for instance, I have done everything up until just recently. I've done everything based on donations. And that was a grand lesson, because then my value has been this confusing act of money that comes in. But when you set up a donation, ain't nobody feeling like they got to donate, because like I'm just showing up.
Right.
And we also live like in a post-pandemic, right? So a lot of people are struggling, and I also live in a world where everyone's trying to create. So I can't put a huge price tag doesn't happen down here. I also don't live in the Northern Hemisphere, so the price tags are different down here.
Yeah.
Right.
So that feels like the most challenging thing to me, honestly, because the rest of it feels pretty natural. It feels pretty natural. And having come through my story and feeling the feelings I feel, and I have 2 daughters, and we are still living in a patriarchy. So like my intention behind these things is true and real and deep. You know, women must start empowering themselves. Women can do that so easily when they get together. When we get together, we're like, we're I want to say triggering, but that's got a weird connotation these days. But we're bringing back an ancestral practice of when we were powerful.
We're waking each other up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what came through intuitively when you were talking about your difficulties? Are you open to hearing that? Okay.
Yeah, can everybody hear it?
So, just share it with the world. So, it's more about those challenges that you're experiencing. You experience something in your life, and then the opportunity comes up, or the forum comes up for you to then turn around and use that. So teacher learn, teacher teach. Healer heal thyself, healer then heal others. So it's this cyclical thing. And it typically comes with a master number. I'm a 33-6, and that's exactly how I share, how I teach. 90% of the posts, or not even the posts in the group, but those moon messages or the monthly messages or the whatever those messages are, those are 90% of the time that shit that I'm also dealing with, but it also becomes the greater message for the whole. Spirit's like, you have to deal with this, and then share with how what you learned as a result of it. So that seems that's what's coming through for you, and why it can feel so difficult. But it's because you're the bringer of the knowledge, and in order to bring the most authentic, truest form of that healing and knowledge, you must first experience it yourself. So that's what was coming through when you were talking.
Joe, thank you so much. And actually it makes me think, some moons ago a woman had identified like, Steph, how, because in each of my circles there's it's not a process, but there are things that we do know, certain things, and there's ritual in each one, and so I try to do some sort of activity, which we can place under the category of ritual. And so one time, and it was actually at this moon that she had made this comment, I hadn't moved my body recently. I got 2 kids, they're 3 and 6, and we, and I had felt like on this instinctual level, like I had reminded myself, I haven't moved, I haven't run, I haven't done any yoga, like I'm feeling stiff on a big level of stiff. And so I use the astrology that's happening in the moon, so for somehow, like what I did then is the ritual that we did was through movement, and it was yoga, and I wrote a story that went along with these 10 yoga poses. And so the story, it encapsulates like what's happening with the astrology. It's simple enough that people don't have to listen. Like I read them the short story beforehand, and then I used music, and we went into yoga. And so this woman later was like, Steph, every time it's so different. And I was like, right, because I'm completely basing it off of an intuitional what's going on with me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then this trust that like, and
Mhm.
sometimes maybe it's easy to trust, like if I haven't moved lately, I can probably guarantee that a portion of my women haven't moved.
Right. Yeah.
And so then after that validation, it was really easy for me to, because then the
Mhm.
other thing that we're trying to all do in this world is trust more, right?
Right.
And like that's so hard.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so of course hearing that sort of comment, and right there having heard that comment after this particular process of having listened to myself, right, that's a reminder of trust.
Mm.
Trusting the
Yeah.
little one. So
The process, yeah. It's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I was just listening to I don't know if you've heard of like the channelings of Quo. It's the law of one. And one of the things was in there was talking about how one of like the channels as it was coming through were saying like, you know, we're thankful for the opportunity to teach today because as the teacher teaches, he or she also learns.
100%. That's beautiful.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think you covered a lot, but I want to know like what are your hopes and dreams for the future of these circles?
Oh, so many good hopes and dreams for the future of women. It needs, so I guess my answer needs to be separated from like, sure, I have visions. I'm gonna go have a meeting in a week about a cultural center. I wanted to rent my own space. I want to have space. I'm also a doula, so I accompany women in their whole birthing process. I also give Reiki sessions. So I'm doing that. So I'm starting to collect this bigger picture of a sign on a door, you know, and all the decoration on the inside. But that's one thing. When you ask something like, what's the future of these women's circles? No, that more come. And I wish that money wasn't a thing. You know, I wish that there wasn't this need to like have an interchange, because just more women need to start showing up.
Yeah.
And so what's the hope for these? Yeah, sure, that they grow. Of course, now I'm just talking about all the business stuff of it. Because, yeah, of course, I can picture how to turn a women's circle into a week-long retreat. This is possible. This is possible,
Yeah.
no? But
Yes.
right now, and I have this other, I don't want to refer to it as a hurdle, but I'm not at actually, there are two things to talk about, because here where I live in this country, ritual still exists, deeply exists. People are still speaking, and when I say their native language, I don't mean Spanish. I mean they're speaking Quechua. And people every August go out and they make ofrendas to the Pachamama. So like people are still deeply part of ritual, but they're also too busy just surviving to do something flowery like a women's circle. Who's got time for that? And I certainly don't have money to pay for it. But then when I go back up at home, where time and money exist, the awareness of ritual and sacred tradition doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Is that an understatement?
I mean, it's the worst of both worlds coupled with the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I know that the money part of it is a difficult thing to overcome, but we are humans living in a 3D world
We need
where
to eat.
money, we need to eat and you know, have shelter and have the things, and it's part of our lives. I think there's I know for myself, like my plans for the future are to have to have offerings, but to offer them on some kind of sliding scale.
Yeah, I have.
So that
I do arrange. I also think maybe I bring it up too because you often I hear that they can't come because of it,
yeah.
no? And so then, of course, I offer like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
this little candle that I've used. This is what she offered in exchange for the circle, and I didn't question it. I was like, yep, this is fine because
Yeah.
it's so good that she's here. And then after having her share and everything, it was like, right, so glad that she came. And this was the candle she bought herself for her birthday
Yes.
while she was going through her separation and trying to figure out what to do with her kids. So actually, this candle, while it's not the money, but this was a super important piece of her to like give over, no? And so of course I try to wrap that in. I
Yeah.
just yeah, it's kind of the marriage between these two things that I see in my two worlds, because my head is still in the northern hemisphere, no? And that these people down here that
Yeah.
have this ancestral tradition don't have the time or money. Like money, no? Whatever money is, they
Yeah.
don't.
You become a bridge at the point.
Yeah. And so I went home and I did some circles up at home, no? And so right. And I have an online, a virtual new
Uh-huh.
moon book club in English.
Oh,
I
okay.
hide the fact of a women's circle behind a book. It's a secret. Don't tell anybody. But so it's like we're intentionally choosing books that are like female empowering. And then I
Sure.
usually bring in, like, I open it as a sacred space. I do the same things that I do in a circle. So I open it as a sacred space. I sometimes try to get in like a meditation or an activity that has to do with the book, no? But at the same time, we're just reading a book.
Okay.
Mm.
Right.
So I gotta like go in easy with the North Americans who don't have forgotten ritual.
Yeah.
So
Well, we end up being, some of us end up becoming so disconnected from our familiar traditions and ancestry and all that. So yeah, along with the loss of ancestry and knowing where we come from or who we come from, that's where the ritual is lost.
totally. And we've all become disconnected. Pretty period. Like I think we could just leave the sentence right there even sometimes.
Yes.
You guys, the two of you know
Absolutely.
that better than anybody else. So I think that the future vision is just that this happens more. That this happens more.
Yeah.
That it's not just me. It's not just me here in the valley, in the Sacred Valley. And it would be beautiful if it starts happening in those places where we've truly disconnected, like from the earth, from each other, from practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Little by
beautiful.
little.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So can anyone join your English book club circle?
Sure.
Anyone like on? Yeah.
Sure. You will have all of my places to find
Yes,
me.
everything.
Yeah, I wouldn't put my phone number out there. And I know a lot of people are anti WhatsApp in the United States, which is fine. But yeah, they can find me. We can get in there. We're finishing a book this next month. We just finished. Well, we're working on Isabel Allende's novel, just of her autobiography. I think it's her autobiography.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll get into if women rose rooted. So the idea is that it's a women's book club, and like I said, we're definitely intentionally going through and reading our book. Picking books. No?
Sure.
So that, and then if there is anybody out there, I do a full moon in-person circle here where I live, and then I do a full moon virtual circle in Spanish, in español.
Okay.
So if that person existed out there that wanted to join that, it would be the same.
Yeah, we do. We do. I know we do have some Spanish-speaking listeners.
Yeah, pues, a la hora peruana. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Steph. This was such a beautiful conversation. It was wonderful to speak with you today.
It was just beautiful to also just to hear more details of your journey and
it's good to remember that. Yeah. It's the impact is really, and I hope this for everyone, know that when they look back on their journey, that all those twists and turns make sense now.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
always circles back.
That it just makes sense now. And I did also want to just encourage the public out there to gather together. It's so easy. And Joe, I found myself thinking when I thought about it, you mentioned this a lot too, like I think you say like with powerful intention. Like when we go into things, you have an adjective you put in front of intention. Like with really meaningful intention, a group of women can get together and not get caught up in like if a group of friends gets together, it's really easy for us to just sit there and keep chatting. No? And that's the thing where if you
Yes.
really want to like set up, and if we want to call it a sacred space, like a space where it's intentional, something has to pull those women to a different conversation, right? So like something as simple as a candle. And so we sit around the candle, and we just we know and we remember that when we sit around the candle, now the conversation is going to be a little bit more directed, you know, and like from here, from the lower chakras, instead of here, like about the days and about the families and about the kids.
I think the candle is right. Yeah, I think the candle is that like invocation of spirit, of the higher self, of light, of that you know, that more of like you just said, like not so much the lower earthly stuff, it's the higher, just more beautiful love centered things.
You guys have also talked about making an altar,
You know, and
and so like having this representation of the four elements. Sorry, Joe, I think there's a how do you call it?
That's all right. So, I mean, what I was going to say is that I'm not big into rituals. It's not something that has how do I say? It's not that it's not interesting to me, because it's beautiful and wonderful. It doesn't my Capricorn brain doesn't make enough room for it sometimes in my when I do presentations or teaching or whatever. But I do know that in like a random class or something, when there's space at the end for people to ask questions and there's no agenda or anything like that, what's on your mind, it's always very beautiful. And there's always, people that, so it's giving people that space to just talk about whatever. It's always very beautiful. So it doesn't matter that it's not in a circle, but oh my God, the beauty of a circle. It makes me go, why do I not incorporate more of these things into, my practices?
And everybody, I mean, like 5 years doing this, everyone walks out happy. Everybody walks out happy, even the ones that are crying a lot. Like they feel really good afterwards.
Yeah. And that's all you can hope for.
Yeah. So
that's beautiful.
That would be the future of them if just more people just take the time, make the space, and light a candle. No?
Yeah.
So here's to that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Joe, you have something for us on the closing vibe?
I do. So this equinox that we're experiencing. So we're recording today on the equinox. And this won't come out until Friday, right? Friday.
Yes.
And so we'll have been past it, but the message will still be the same. Because, this doesn't feel like a message that is just a one-time thing. So this particular equinox is bringing a wave of energy that supports transformation. Transformation is such a huge thing, and it's a reset. So it's time to, finally release and surrender, that old stuff like suffering and doubt, and really get ready for that year ahead, because we're also moving into a brand new astrological year. So depending on which numerology personal year that anybody is in, the energy of the message that I'm about to read and that number, how they come together, are going to be different for everybody, but it's really unique to you. All right, so the message is from the Eight of Cups and the King of Swords. I'm just going to summarize it just by saying that the way to master this energy is to surrender all that heaviness of that last year, everything that you've been carrying around. Let's even start with since the beginning of COVID, right? March of 2020. So we're going 2 years ago. For the last 2 years, since we've been under quarantine and the world is shut down, it's now time to really just sort of surrender that heaviness. And then choose that one thing, choose that sacred dream, choose that dream and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do now and move forward. And so everything that we need begins with us first and foremost inside. So it's time to go back inside. All right. So
Yeah.
now if you take the message of that as it applies to the personal energy that you're in this year, then you have a really specific path forward. So for you, Fiora, Elise, you are in an 11-2 year, and that 11-2 year is it's a master year, and so a 2 is typically about partnerships, patience, balance, and harmony, cultivating that balance in all areas of your life. Okay, but that 11 year in there, it's a little bit different because that 11 is a double one energy. So it's about action, moving forward, taking action, moving it all to the front seat. So you are sort of like in your personal year, where all of these things are going to come to the forefront. It's how those relationships help you, and then the actions that need to be taken as a result of them, or the actions that come up, or the things that come up that you need to act on when it comes to bringing in more partnerships and balance and harmony in your life. So I
Wow.
know. And the 2 year, listen, I'm gonna tell you, the 2 year was not my favorite because it was slow, and there was just a lot of bullshit that you have to deal with. But it's also that year where you turn around and you go, I you know what you're capable of after a 2 year. You yourself are capable of. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, stuff for you. You have a year in a personal year 8, and your theme is empowerment, finances, material wealth, and success. It's mostly about disempowerment and then empowerment. Disempowerment, where seeing all of the areas of your life where you feel disempowered, where you are disempowered, where you think disempowered, and then sort of flipping them and saying, okay, that's not going to work for me, right? So then you go back to the message, surrender, but do so with a tenacity and a focus. Surrender this stuff. I'm going to give this up. I'm going to give all the disempowering things up, but this is how I'm going to do that. There's a plan. And then the flip on that is the other side of empowerment of disempowerment is empowerment. So how are you helping others? Because that person who is no longer disempowered, they're empowered. That's great, but how do you use your power? And then when you do it within the scope of your soul's urging, that material wealth and success it comes as a result of it. Yeah. So that's why. Okay, first off, let me tell you, that's why I freaking love numerology, because it's just so badass.
It's incredible.
It just explains everything. But that's why it's important for people to pull some cards for yourself, and then compare those messages of the cards that come up with your universal or your personal year, and it'll help give you a lot more insight into how to proceed and what's holding you back.
That's incredible.
All right. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Everybody's welcome.
All right, guys. All right. Well, as you know, you can find us on all the socials under Esoterics Podcast, and be sure to join our Facebook community, the Esoterics Podcast community, to hear firsthand about our services, events, and courses, as well as get intuitive development tips, card pulls, free meditations, and a lot more.
Because obviously we've been inspired. And maybe, there'll be a couple virtual meditations in there. I say that all the time, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get back to it. But maybe I will. Maybe now is the time to surrender my bullshit, not following through with those.
Yeah.
Right? All right. Thank you for sharing space with us today. Stay mystical, magical, and ready to do it again next week.